When the devil whispers into Cancer's ear, it is not the whisper of chaos for chaos' sake. It is a deeply personal, almost intimate temptation. It calls out not through fury or blatant destruction, but through the language Cancer knows best: emotion, memory, and longing. This whisper is not always loud, but it is hauntingly familiar. It speaks through old wounds, through betrayals that haven't fully healed, through disappointments that linger in the soul's inner tide. The devil's voice knows that to move Cancer, one must touch the heart, stir the waters of the past, and make the crab believe that vengeance, withdrawal, or manipulation will protect what it holds dear. Yet this voice underestimates the true power that lies within Cancer. This sign, ruled by the moon, is not a passive pool. It is an ocean, ancient and cyclical, capable of storms but also of immense serenity. The devil may try to anchor Cancer in bitterness, but the moon always pulls with a greater force, drawing the soul back toward healing, toward higher emotional intelligence, toward love even after pain. The lunar tides within Cancer are stronger than any infernal whisper. Temptation for Cancer doesn't always come in the form of external chaos. It manifests through internal retreat. The urge to close off, to stop trusting, to wall the heart in stone and let no one in ever again. To sting before being stung. To manipulate emotion before someone else can use it as a weapon. But even in its lowest moments, Cancer remembers its origin. The sacred protector of the hearth. The empath who senses the pain of others even when its own wounds scream for attention. There is a primal nobility within Cancer that cannot be extinguished, no matter how dark the voice. When the devil whispers to Cancer to abandon its integrity, Cancer's intuitive core shudders. It may hesitate, it may consider, for no one knows the weight of pain like Cancer, but it will not obey. The soul of Cancer has tasted the abyss and yet rises again with compassion. It does not destroy to feel powerful. It protects to remain pure. Even when tempted to turn cold, Cancer burns with a hidden flame, a deep, ancestral fire that carries the resilience of centuries. It is the fire of the divine feminine, of the ancient mother, of the sacred guardian. There is a sacred war within every Cancer, a tension between the urge to escape or attack and the soul's greater calling to shelter and heal. That war is not a flaw, it is the battlefield of transformation. Each time Cancer chooses not to strike in fear but to act in wisdom, it wins a cosmic battle. Each time it chooses love over retaliation, empathy over judgment, forgiveness over obsession, a shadow is banished. The devil may whisper, but Cancer knows how to silence that voice. Not by denying its existence, but by listening with full awareness and refusing to act in its name. The temptation to do harm does not seduce Cancer with promises of domination or conquest. It tempts with the illusion of protection through cruelty, of justice through revenge. But Cancer knows a higher truth, that the most profound strength lies in holding the line between pain and compassion. That to nurture in a world that wounds is not weakness, it is defiance. It is sacred rebellion. It is divine courage. Even in solitude, even when misunderstood, even when overwhelmed by waves of emotion that threaten to drown its light, Cancer endures. And not just endures, it transmutes. It takes the venom and turns it into medicine. It takes abandonment and turns it into the fierce will to never abandon another. It takes sorrow and spins it into the language of empathy, intuition, and protection. The devil may whisper, but Cancer's heart roars with lunar truth. There is a profound mythic nobility in Cancer's refusal to surrender to its own darkness. It knows the darkness well, walks its inner corridors with familiarity, but never kneels to it. The trials of this sign are not curses, they are the crucible. Through them, Cancer becomes a guardian not just of people, but of sacred emotional codes. Its strength is not forged in loud conquests, but in the silent decisions made in the midnight of the soul, to not give in, to not turn cold, to not forget the soft power of love. In the story of the zodiac, Cancer is the keeper of memory, the healer of emotional wounds, the silent warrior who defends what is unseen. When the devil whispers, Cancer listens, but not to obey. It listens to understand, to recognize the darkness in itself, and then to rise above it. It carries that voice, not as a burden, but as proof that even in the face of the abyss, the heart can remain whole. And so, when the devil comes with his poisoned tongue and false promises, Cancer does not shatter. It retreats, it reflects, it cries if it must. But then it returns with eyes wide open and soul intact. For it is not fear that guides Cancer, but love. Not vengeance, but vision. Not bitterness, but legacy. That is the quiet power of the sign. That is the epic silence that defeats the whisper. The devil's whisper to Cancer is not merely an event. It is a cycle, a test woven into the soul's journey across lifetimes. For Cancer is not a surface dweller in the zodiac. It is a creature of depth, of ancestral echoes, of emotional memory stored in the marrow of its being. The darkness that approaches Cancer does not always wear horns or wield fire. It often wears the face of a familiar fear, a reawakened sorrow, or a love that turned to poison. This sign does not fear the night. It fears the betrayal of the light, and the whisper of the devil plays upon that dread like a musician plucking the strings of a haunted violin. But Cancer's soul was forged under lunar tides that remember every betrayal, every sacrifice, every silent scream that was never heard. This memory, while heavy, is also a source of sacred clarity. When tempted by the darker path, Cancer does not simply resist out of virtue. It resists because it has already known suffering and refuses to become the author of it. There is a code within Cancer's heart, invisible yet indestructible, written in tears and sealed in love. It is not a code of weakness, but of unshakable honor. The whisper of temptation may tell Cancer to abandon its softness, to let the shell become a fortress of cruelty instead of protection. It may tell Cancer that silence is safer than truth, that isolation is easier than vulnerability, that revenge is more powerful than mercy. And for a time, Cancer may believe it, because this sign feels so deeply, so completely, that it sometimes forgets the boundary between what it absorbs and what it is. But even when consumed by grief or fury, something ancient in Cancer's soul stirs like a dragon beneath the waves, a reminder that the spirit was not made to break, but to evolve. Cancer's path is not linear. Its evolution is not through force or fame, but through emotional alchemy. Each time Cancer confronts the voice of its own shadows and chooses to stay soft, it becomes stronger. Each time it weeps instead of wounds, nurtures instead of destroys, speaks from the wound instead of masking it with armor, it becomes more than what it was. The devil's whisper becomes the contrast that defines the light, not the end of the story. Temptation becomes a catalyst, not a cage. There is an ancient wisdom in Cancer's soul, older than words, older than fear. It is the wisdom of the mother who endures famine to feed her children, the warrior who stands between home and harm, the healer who absorbs pain in order to transform it. This is why Cancer, though vulnerable, is never weak. This is why the devil cannot truly conquer it. Because even in the most broken places of the heart, Cancer plants seeds of redemption. Every emotional scar becomes a map for others to follow. Every time Cancer rises after being cut down by betrayal or loss, it carries the blueprint of resurrection within its chest. And it does not keep this sacred power for itself. It shares it in silence, in presence, in the way it holds space for others, even when its own soul is still bleeding. This is spiritual defiance of the highest order. When the world misunderstands Cancer's quietude, it does not see the war being waged within. It does not see the courage it takes to feel everything and still choose love. The devil may offer numbness as escape, power as protection, coldness as immunity, but Cancer, despite the ache, chooses to remain fully alive. That choice over and over is how Cancer conquers. This sign does not need to announce its victories. It does not seek applause or vengeance. Its triumphs are internal, profound, and eternal. They happen in the moment a tear is turned into a prayer, a fear into faith, a pain into purpose. That is the secret majesty of Cancer. That is its epic. Astrologically, this sign's connection to the fourth house of roots and origin reminds us that Cancer is not only the guardian of personal emotion. It is the protector of the emotional foundations of the world. Family, home, heritage, soul memory. These are the sacred territories Cancer defends, not with aggression, but with the fierce loyalty of the heart. When darkness threatens those sanctuaries, Cancer becomes something elemental. This wrath is not chaos, but cleansing. The sorrow is not weakness, but wisdom. This compassion is not passive, but revolutionary. To walk the path of Cancer is to be both sanctuary and storm. It is to be the one who carries generations of emotional truth and still chooses to create beauty. It is to rise from betrayal not with hate, but with greater clarity about what love must truly be. The devil can tempt, but it cannot possess a soul that chooses again and again to turn toward the moon, toward healing, toward wholeness. In this silent defiance, Cancer becomes the quiet savior of the zodiac. It teaches that the greatest power is not in resisting pain, but in being transformed by it without losing the essence of love. Its emotional waters do not drown, it baptize. Its tears do not weaken, they cleanse. And its heart, no matter how often it is tempted to harden, remains a sacred fortress where only the truth can enter and only love is allowed to stay. The devil's whisper to Cancer is not only a moment of inner temptation. It is also a reflection of the cosmic tension between light and shadow within the emotional cosmos of the sign. Cancer does not operate on the logic of fire or air. It navigates the unseen, the emotional undercurrents of the universe, the whispers of forgotten wounds, the echoes of ancestral longing. The darkness that tries to seduce Cancer is subtle and spiritual. It approaches not with thunder but with familiarity. It says, "This is what you deserve." When pain feels like home, it says, "No one will understand you." When isolation wraps its arms around the soul, it says, "You are too much." When sensitivity becomes a weapon in the hands of those who cannot feel as deeply. But what the shadow does not understand is that Cancer's very being is woven from lunar resilience. The moon, with its constant cycles of death and rebirth, teaches Cancer how to move through darkness without becoming it. Temptation may cause delay. Sorrow may pull the soul down into its coldest caves, but Cancer does not remain imprisoned. This sign is not merely emotional. It is transformational. It is the tide that retreats only to gather force, returning with wisdom carved from the abyss. There is a spiritual dignity in the way Cancer walks through temptation, not by denying the darkness, but by learning to cradle it. The devil may try to convince Cancer to abandon its essence, to weaponize its depth into manipulation, to turn nurturing into control, to use empathy as a tool for dominance. But Cancer's wisdom lies in discernment. Though it feels everything, it learns to choose what it becomes. And even when it falls, it does not lose the map of the heart. Even when the whisper becomes a storm, Cancer listens for the deeper truth beneath it, the truth that no voice outside the soul can define it. Temptation may enter through the wound, but Cancer's healing power is sourced from within. Its inner child, often battered by years of emotional betrayal, does not vanish. It becomes the guardian of innocence. Its shadows, once feared, become sacred companions in the journey towards self-knowledge. And its heart, though vulnerable, becomes impenetrable to lies, because it has already been to the edge and returned with its integrity intact. Astrologically, Cancer carries the elemental force of water, but not just any water. It is not the crashing wave of Pisces nor the rushing current of Scorpio. It is the primordial ocean, the womb of the world, the sacred source from which life itself emerges. When darkness tries to corrupt that source, Cancer does not confront it with fire or rage, but with memory, with presence, with the unfailing act of choosing softness in a hardened world. That softness is not naive, it is revolutionary. It is a form of spiritual warfare that disarms cruelty not with retaliation but with unwavering truth. There is a hidden mythology within Cancer that few understand. This sign is the soul of the protector, the emotional alchemist, the silent priestess who guards the threshold between pain and purpose. When the devil whispers, it forgets that Cancer communes with the divine through intuition, that its tears are prayers, that its fears are portals, that its loyalty to love is a force that even the darkness must eventually bow to. And when Cancer weeps for others, when it carries burdens not its own, when it chooses compassion over survivalism, it writes a new cosmic law, that the heart is not a weakness, but the very throne of the soul. The reason the devil can never fully conquer Cancer is because this sign is aligned with the cycle of the moon. In every phase of emotional death, there is always a coming rebirth. No matter how lost, no matter how silent, no matter how consumed by sorrow, Cancer carries an inner lighthouse. It may flicker, but it never goes out. That light is not built on ego. It is not built on performance. It is built on the raw truth of emotion, on the sacred act of feeling when it would be easier to numb, of trusting when it would be easier to control, of returning to love when it would be easier to close. The epic journey of Cancer is not toward worldly victory, but toward emotional sovereignty, toward a place where it no longer mistakes its empathy for weakness, where it no longer offers itself to those who feed on its vulnerability, where it no longer hides its magic for fear of being misunderstood. When the devil tries to twist Cancer's depth into a curse, Cancer responds by becoming the cure. When it is told to shut down, it opens wider. When it is told to guard its heart with cruelty, it guards it with discernment and compassion. That is its sacred rebellion. That is its hidden fire. In the great astrological wheel, Cancer is the sign that holds the emotional architecture of the soul. Without Cancer, there is no home, no heart, no healing. Its role is not to fight with weapons but to endure with soul, to feel what others cannot, to love in places where love has died, to bring warmth into the coldest corners of existence. The devil's whisper may reach Cancer's ear, but it will never touch the core. That core is holy. That core is ancestral. That core is a lunar flame that cannot be extinguished, only renewed. Cancer's power lies in its refusal to give up on the sacred. In a world that profits from numbness, Cancer's feeling heart is an act of defiance. In a world that punishes softness, Cancer's embrace becomes a revolution. The devil may offer power through detachment, but Cancer knows a deeper power, the power to remain tender in the face of terror, to remain loyal in the face of betrayal, to remain human in a world that forgets what that means. And through that unyielding truth, Cancer rises, again and again, without needing recognition, without needing revenge, just with the quiet, unstoppable force of the soul coming home to itself. The devil's whisper to Cancer becomes particularly dangerous not when it is loud or violent, but when it is quiet and disguised as self-protection. For Cancer, whose essence is rooted in emotion, memory, and nurturing, the greatest seduction lies in retreating so deeply into the shell that it forgets it ever had claws to defend itself or a heart strong enough to stay open. The true challenge does not lie in facing others, but in facing the illusion that solitude equals safety, that silence equals peace, that detachment equals healing. These are the poisoned ideas that creep in when the soul is tired and the moon is dark. There is a sacred aspect of Cancer that must learn to discern between withdrawal as restoration and withdrawal as escape. When the devil whispers to Cancer to vanish into emotional exile, to become unreachable even to the self, it preys on Cancer's deepest longing to be safe from harm. It suggests that the only way to never feel pain again is to become invisible. But Cancer was not made to be hidden. It was made to be a light in the deepest night. Its soul is not one that withers in exposure, but one that is shaped through experience and brought to brilliance by emotional risk. From an astrological perspective, Cancer's ruler, the moon, moves quickly through the zodiac, changing signs every 2.5 days. This rapid cycling symbolizes Cancer's rich emotional landscape, its sensitivity to cycles and rhythms, and its intimate connection with the inner life. But it also means that emotions, though intense, are not eternal. What the devil does not understand is that Cancer has learned how to ride the emotional tides, how to allow grief to pass through without becoming its prison. What appears as fragility is, in truth, an ancient, intuitive resilience that flows like water, never broken, only redirected. Temptation for Cancer is often not grand or explosive. It is subtle, like the desire to suppress truth to avoid conflict, the willingness to betray oneself in order to maintain peace, the instinct to manipulate a situation gently in order to avoid being hurt. These are the forms of darkness that Cancer must confront within itself, not because it is evil, but because it is profoundly human. And this confrontation is not a punishment but a rite of passage. Cancer's evolution is about learning to hold love and truth in equal measure, even when truth threatens the illusion of peace. This sign carries the archetype of the healer, but not in the form of the one who fixes others. It is the one who creates emotional space so others can find themselves. When distorted, this becomes martyrdom, codependency, or emotional overextension. The devil whispers, "If you give enough, they will stay." But the truth that Cancer must learn is this: love is not proven by sacrifice alone, and emotional safety is not earned by abandoning the self. The great victory of Cancer is not in how much it can endure, but in how clearly it can honor its own emotional truth without apology. Cancer's lineage is lunar, yes, but it is also profoundly karmic. Many born under this sign carry emotional themes from other lives. Unfinished stories, old grief, ancient promises. The devil's whisper sometimes comes not just from the current life's wounds, but from the echoes of soul history. When Cancer experiences sudden, deep emotion that seems larger than the present moment, it may be tapping into an emotional timeline far older than its current incarnation. The power lies in the awareness of this depth. What once felt overwhelming becomes sacred once Cancer realizes it is the vessel for transmutation, not the victim of the weight. There is also an untapped ferocity within Cancer that is often misunderstood. When provoked or when its loved ones are threatened, Cancer transforms. The softness remains, but it becomes the softness of the wave that can carve cliffs. It becomes the nurturing force that is also capable of absolute protection. The devil may try to shame Cancer for its intensity, for its tears, for its mood shifts, but these are not flaws. These are sacred instruments, divine mechanisms by which Cancer remains aligned with soul truth, even when the world demands performance or pretense. One of Cancer's greatest victories comes when it no longer hides its emotional depth as if it were a liability. When it chooses to lead with vulnerability, not as weakness, but as a form of radical honesty. When it shares its intuition without fear of being mocked. When it refuses to become hardened by a world that does not always understand the language of the heart. These are heroic acts that take place in silence, but they reshape the destiny of the soul. The devil can only seduce Cancer when it forgets how holy its emotional compass truly is. When Cancer reclaims its space, its rhythm, its voice, it no longer needs to armor itself in manipulation or overgiving. It becomes an emotional sovereign, able to love without losing itself, able to feel without drowning, able to protect without controlling. The ancient power of Cancer is the power to nurture not from fear, but from strength. To guard the sacred not with walls, but with presence. To hold space for transformation not only in others but also within the deepest chambers of its own being. And so, the devil's whisper becomes a teacher, not a tyrant. It reveals the places where Cancer still doubts its worth, where it still fears its depth, where it still believes that love must be earned through pain. Once these illusions are exposed, they lose their grip. Cancer rises not because it escapes darkness, but because it learns to walk through it with grace. It remembers that to feel is divine, that to care is powerful, that to remain open is the greatest act of rebellion in a world built on fear. This is the quiet, epic triumph of Cancer, the keeper of the sacred tide, the guardian of the soul's most tender truth, the warrior of light who fights not with blades, but with the courage to feel and still move forward. There exists within Cancer a celestial memory so ancient and pure that even when the voice of darkness wraps itself in the familiar tone of protection, Cancer's soul recognizes the distortion. This sign was not born into the zodiac to remain safe behind walls, but to become a living sanctuary in a world that forgets how to feel. What has not been fully acknowledged in the battle against the devil's whisper is Cancer's unique ability to anchor the divine feminine archetype, not just in softness and nurturing, but in profound intuitive sovereignty. The power of the feminine within Cancer is not submissive, nor passive. It is the power of knowing without proof, of sensing beyond the surface, of navigating shadow with a lamp lit from within. This is the domain of the high priestess, the lunar mother, the crone and the maiden all in one. The devil may come cloaked in guilt, in misplaced responsibility, in ancestral contracts long overdue for release. Cancer, bound by its loyalty to lineage and history, can carry the burdens of others, often confusing them as its own. But this sign has within it the alchemical gift of discernment, the quiet skill of separating what is inherited pain from what is the soul's own sacred truth. The path to freedom is not in denial, but in transmutation. Cancer must walk back through the halls of memory, through the voices of generations, and release itself from vows made in pain, loyalties rooted in fear, and patterns born of trauma. It does not abandon its past, it liberates it. This liberation is not always dramatic or external. It often happens in moments of radical softness, choosing not to repeat an emotional pattern, forgiving oneself for needing rest, allowing tears to cleanse rather than drown. These acts are not small, they are sacred revolutions. They are the proof that Cancer is evolving from emotional captivity to emotional mastery. The devil loses power not because it is destroyed, but because Cancer no longer listens from fear. The whisper becomes background noise to a soul that now hears the moon's call more clearly than the shadow's seduction. Another layer rarely addressed is Cancer's relationship with time. Cancer does not move in the straight line of ambition, but in spirals of reflection and emotional integration. This often means that its growth is not immediately visible, but it is always happening beneath the surface. The devil may mock this slowness, calling it stagnation or weakness, but this is a misunderstanding of sacred timing. Cancer evolves in divine rhythm, and what appears as stillness is often a deep restructuring of the soul. This is the chrysalis, not the grave. It is the moonlit cocoon of metamorphosis, where inner landscapes are reordered, and where ancient emotional truths are reawakened. This sign, so often romanticized for its nurturing qualities, is rarely praised for its raw power. And yet, it is one of the most emotionally resilient signs in the zodiac. Not because it avoids pain, but because it allows pain to shape it into something deeper. Cancer is a vessel that holds both grief and grace, both agony and awe. Its strength lies in the refusal to become numb. It chooses to feel even when it would be easier to shut down. This is not a failure of boundaries. This is the signature of the divine healer who transmutes pain into presence and sorrow into soul wisdom. There is also a celestial guardianship Cancer carries that few understand. This sign is astrologically linked to the gateway between the inner child and the divine parent. It holds the key to emotional reparenting, to ancestral healing, to sacred homecoming. The devil may attempt to sever Cancer from that gate by distorting its memories, by replaying abandonment or rejection, by flooding the heart with doubt. But once Cancer awakens to the truth that it was never meant to be the wounded child forever, it becomes the divine parent to itself and to the world. That act of claiming self-nurture becomes a spell of liberation, and no voice of shame can undo it. There is a holy madness in Cancer's love, a willingness to stay present in the chaos, to feel through every storm, to offer a hand when others run. And when that love turns inward, it becomes something nearly unbreakable. The world often teaches Cancer to extend that love outward, but the final test is always this: can the nurturer nurture the self? Can the moonlight that calms others also soothe the soul within? When this answer becomes yes, the devil's chains dissolve. Not through violence, but through remembrance. Through the reclaiming of worth that was never lost, only hidden beneath layers of emotional sediment. Cancer's epic is not written in loud declarations or overt battles, but in the quiet, sacred, daily acts of returning to the self, no matter how many times the world or the mind has wandered away. It is a story of resilience disguised as tenderness, of warriorhood cloaked in compassion, of emotional courage that rewrites bloodlines. The devil may wait at every emotional threshold, but Cancer carries a greater key: the ability to stand in the dark and still choose to love, still choose to feel, still choose to open. This is not merely survival. This is sacred leadership. This is lunar mastery. This is the unspoken truth that in a cosmos built on vibration, Cancer's emotional resonance is not weakness, but a language of creation. To feel is to remember the origin of the soul. To nurture is to remember the divine within all things. And to refuse the devil's voice, even in silence, even in solitude, even in the deepest night, is to rise with the moon crowned upon the brow, and to walk the world as both temple and tide. Beyond the realms already explored, there lies a truth about Cancer that is rarely spoken and even more rarely understood. Cancer is not only the guardian of emotion but the silent architect of energetic legacy. Its influence, though subtle, extends far beyond the moment. What it feels, what it chooses, and how it heals becomes a blueprint encoded in the soul's lineage. The emotional decisions made in the heart of a Cancer native echo across generations, transforming the invisible structure of entire bloodlines. This sign carries not just the pain of its own story, but the echoes of those who came before. The devil whispers through these echoes, attempting to convince Cancer that it is responsible for fixing what cannot be changed, that the burden of healing belongs to it alone. But Cancer's true power lies not in carrying the weight of others, but in transforming the way it moves through pain itself. There is a cosmic mystery written into the Cancer archetype, one that binds it to the undercurrents of time and karmic retribution. While other signs may move forward with visible force, Cancer travels vertically, deep into the subconscious realms where inherited emotional truths are stored. The devil fears this descent because it cannot survive in the territory where the soul faces itself fully. When Cancer chooses to descend consciously, with the moon as its guide, it becomes an unstoppable force of emotional revelation. It uncovers truths buried not only in its own psyche but within the energetic bones of its ancestry. Each act of awareness becomes an act of liberation, not only for the self but for the unseen many tethered to the same ancient wounds. What is rarely honored is Cancer's capacity to love in layers. Not only in the present, not only the living, but across veils of existence. Cancer loves through time, through memory, through the pulse of the past. This multidimensional compassion can become a double-edged sword when the devil turns it inward, turning devotion into self-erasure. Cancer can believe that saving others is the only way to prove its worth. But the true calling of Cancer is not to sacrifice endlessly, but to love in a way that empowers rather than depletes. When Cancer learns that its love does not need to be pain to be real, it steps into a realm of emotional sovereignty that the devil can no longer reach. This sign is one of the few in the zodiac that understands the language of silence. Cancer speaks not only through words but through presence, through holding space, through the energetic signature of care that cannot be faked. The devil may try to turn that silence into suppression, to make Cancer doubt the value of what it offers simply by being. But when Cancer remembers the sacred value of its presence, when it honors the quiet miracle of emotional availability, it claims a kind of power that is invisible yet indestructible. In a world that moves too fast to feel, Cancer becomes the still point, the sacred pause where truth can be remembered. In its highest form, Cancer is not bound to sentimentality or nostalgia. It is connected to the emotional future as much as to the emotional past. It dreams of a world where love is a foundation, not a transaction, where intuition is not dismissed but exalted, where tenderness is not mocked but revered as a sign of strength. The devil fears this vision because it threatens the illusion that power can only come through dominance or fear. But Cancer's very existence proves otherwise. It leads with heart, not because it is naive, but because it remembers that heart is the original compass of the soul. There is an ancient warrior hidden within Cancer, one that does not ride into battle with steel or flame, but with sacred memory and emotional clarity. This warrior has no need for destruction because its very presence transforms. The devil may speak of power, but Cancer carries the original power, the power of creation itself. The womb of life, the rhythm of tides, the memory of stars within water. When Cancer reclaims this truth, it becomes more than a sign. It becomes a force of cosmic balance. Even the moon, which governs Cancer, knows the beauty of its shadows. It waxes and wanes, revealing and hiding in equal measure. Cancer is like this, not meant to shine in full all the time, but to move in rhythm with emotional truth. This dance is sacred. When Cancer stops judging itself for needing cycles of retreat, for the ebb and flow of inner tides, it becomes whole. The devil cannot touch what is fully owned. And so Cancer defeats the darkness not by denying it, but by integrating it, by saying, "Even this I can hold, and still love, and still rise. The journey of Cancer is not a linear ascent but a spiral path toward deeper wisdom. Each return to familiar pain becomes an opportunity to respond differently, to break a cycle, to reclaim a fragment of power once lost. This is mastery. This is evolution. This is how Cancer shapes destiny, not only for itself but for all who pass through its waters. The moon teaches that every phase has value. Darkness is not failure. Stillness is not regression. Emotion is not weakness. These are the sacred truths that Cancer embodies, and in doing so, it becomes an unshakable pillar of the zodiac soul. The devil may come with doubts, with illusions of unworthiness, with fears wrapped in memories. But Cancer's intuition, when trusted, slices through illusion like moonlight through fog. It sees what others miss, feels what others fear, and it chooses to care anyway. That is the essence of Cancer's courage. Not the absence of pain, but the commitment to feel and still love, to break and still mend, to be misunderstood and still remain true. This is how Cancer wins. Not by denying the whisper, but by listening with discernment and answering with the voice of the soul. The voice that says, I know who I am, I know what I carry, and I choose to make it holy. There is a depth within Cancer that no other sign possesses, an emotional gravity that anchors the soul even in the wildest storms of existence. Beneath the surface layers of vulnerability and nurturing lies a sacred inheritance. Cancer is the cosmic guardian of sacred emotional truth. This truth is not rooted in logic or visible action, but in vibration, resonance, and the unseen bonds that connect souls across time. The devil may attempt to pervert this gift by twisting empathy into entrapment, but what is rarely explored is how Cancer, once aware of its own emotional architecture, becomes untouchable. It does not harden like stone. It becomes like the ocean, resilient, adaptive, timeless, capable of carrying entire worlds within its depths without ever ceasing to move. Cancer is astrologically connected to the Great Mother archetype, and this energy flows through its being whether one is aware of it or not. This mother energy is not merely about giving birth to others. It is about birthing worlds of compassion, nourishing forgotten pieces of the self, and restoring sacred trust to a planet that has buried feeling beneath ambition. In a collective environment that is increasingly driven by speed and competition, Cancer walks a different path. It carries the remembrance of gentleness, of the language of touch, of the importance of safety in a world that no longer understands how to pause. The devil does not scream at Cancer to destroy. It tempts with the idea of giving up on softness entirely, of abandoning the inner garden and allowing it to be overgrown by apathy. But Cancer, though it may retreat, never truly forgets the sanctuary within. This sign's intuition is lunar in essence, cyclical, ever-shifting, yet devastatingly accurate. Cancer knows the truth without needing words. It senses shifts in energy before events occur. It receives emotional downloads through dreams, silence, and body sensations. The devil fears this, because it cannot hide in illusion for long under Cancer's gaze. Yet what is not often praised is the sheer strength it takes for Cancer to live with such sensitivity. To walk through life with an exposed heart and still keep offering it to others is an act of unmatched bravery. The world celebrates the warrior who draws blood, but forgets the quiet warrior who tends the soul's wounds long after the battle ends. Cancer is that quiet warrior. It is the keeper of sacred space, the witness to inner transformation, the guardian of what others abandon in haste. While the whispers of darkness may attempt to convince Cancer that emotional self-preservation means emotional isolation, what is truly at stake is connection. Real, sacred, unshakable connection to self, to others, to spirit. When Cancer chooses to feel instead of freeze, when it holds space for truth rather than deflection, it becomes a bridge. A bridge between the seen and unseen, between the mind and the body, between the earth and the cosmos. This bridging power is not loud, but it is absolute. Cancer builds inner temples with every act of self-honesty. These temples become a refuge not only for itself but for all those seeking truth in a world addicted to illusion. One of the most powerful, yet rarely explored, aspects of Cancer's astrological path is its connection to emotional lineage. Cancer is the living altar of the family tree. It carries not just personal emotions, but the psychic residue of generations. It dreams the unspoken traumas of ancestors, feels the echoes of patterns that were never voiced, and often finds itself trying to resolve what others could not. This sacred task, if unconscious, becomes a burden. But when Cancer awakens to its power as a conscious emotional healer of the ancestral field, the weight turns to light. The sorrow becomes song. The lineage is no longer a chain. It becomes a river of blessing flowing through the heart of a soul that finally knows its own value. Cancer is a builder of inner worlds. These worlds are not visible in concrete form, but they are as real as any fortress or kingdom. They are built through the acts of care that seem small to others. Remembering someone's pain, listening without fixing, holding back judgment, staying present through emotional chaos. These acts do not fade. They imprint the soul's fabric with a legacy of trust. The devil's temptation may offer quick escape, but Cancer builds endurance. It creates safety that lasts, truth that remains, and love that does not demand. These are the foundations of sacred power. There is also a forgotten ferocity in Cancer that does not arise from anger but from sacred defense. When pushed past its limit, when the sanctity of love or safety is violated, Cancer awakens a force as primal as the tide pulled by the moon. This is not rage, it is sacred wrath. It is the voice of the archetypal protector, not seeking revenge but demanding reverence. This power is not chaotic. It is precise. When Cancer speaks from this place, even the darkest energies must retreat. For it does not speak from ego. It speaks from the deep, ancestral soul, where truth and justice meet in silence. The journey of Cancer is not to be free of pain, but to become the alchemist of it. The sign transforms sorrow into sacred insight, heartbreak into deeper capacity for love, loss into wisdom that transcends lifetimes. The devil cannot follow where this path leads, because it requires full surrender to truth, and Cancer is willing to be that vulnerable. The sign does not flee from darkness. It learns to walk beside it, carrying the lantern of intuition and the sword of empathy. This is its divine rebellion, to stay soft, to stay loving, to keep believing in the good even after encountering the worst. Cancer's greatness lies in what it protects and preserves. It is the keeper of the sacred flame in a world gone cold. The soul of Cancer has been forged not in fire, but in depth. It has learned to breathe underwater, to speak the language of soul through eyes, through hands, through silence. When it refuses to become what hurt it, when it refuses to use pain as a reason to close off, it becomes the guardian of a higher emotional law, one that says love is not weakness, that care is not submission, that feeling is not failure. This is the victory that the devil cannot comprehend. Not a loud triumph, not an egoic conquest, but the quiet return of the heart to itself, the unshakable choice to live in alignment with soul no matter the cost. Cancer may be tempted to abandon this path, to fall into the cold embrace of numbness, but the moon always calls it back. Always, because within Cancer lives the seed of the divine feminine, the voice of the Great Mother, the presence of something ancient and infinite and whole. And no darkness can ever unwrite what was written in moonlight.